Good morning and welcome to this panel, sort of called about young people, but I find panels that say things like youth not very exciting. So this is actually something about the next generation of leaders of this complicated world we live in. My name is Kamal Ahmed. I'm the editor-in-chief and co-founder of the News Movement. We're a new business which is looking at how do we create content that is engaging, trusted, factual, non-partisan for particularly younger demographics who often find traditional news media offers not incredibly thrilling. We've got 45 minutes together with four amazing global shapers from the World Economic Forum. I do like a Friday session at Davos. It's a time for reflection. Lots of us have been together for a whole week and had very interesting and exciting conversations. It'll be wonderful to get the reflections from our panel about what they've heard, what they've seen, what they've enjoyed, and of course the criticisms that we know we still need to make of ourselves about the progress or lack of progress that we're making. We're together for 45 minutes. Welcome to the audience here and also to those watching on our live stream. But let's get straight to our conversation. And we've all got rather stiff surnames here, but we're a kind of first name kind of panel. So I'm going to use everyone's first name through this to keep it nice and relaxed. And Joseph, I'm going to come to you first. A little bit about yourself, I think, would be wonderful. Why you're here, and then just the experience you've had, and maybe let's just pick out three things you've enjoyed or you've learned that are positive takeaways from the week we've had together.
Of course, thank you, Kamal. So my name is Joseph Solis. I was born in Ecuador, but I'm based in Chicago, so I'm the Vice-Curator of the Chicago Hub. I'm a digital media scholar. I study digital studies of language, history, and culture, and I'm also a writer. And specifically, my research focuses on the semantics of oppression using artificial intelligence. Why am I here? That's a great question. Why are we here? I think, artificial intelligence is a hot topic right now. And also, we need to do more work in diversity and inclusion. So I think I come in the intersection of those worlds of technology and inclusion and how we can move the conversation forward there. To answer your question about the things that I've learned, I was very surprised. I don't know if you all were there at the Pride at the Promenade. The 15 businesses light up their businesses with rainbow colors. I was not expecting that. I didn't know that was going to happen. So I think there's a lot of things happening in terms of visibility and businesses taking a public stand on where they stand with these types of issues. So I learned that there is hope. I've also learned from my peers various things, especially in areas that I don't have experience in. So that has been a tremendous, beautiful experience. And I have learned that arts and cultures are going to be more critical now that we move into an AI world. We need to start focusing on how that's going to change and shape society and humanity.
That's really helpful, Joseph. Thank you. What are the types? Give us an insight into the type of work that you are doing. This intersection, I think, is really interesting, and how new technology, we protect ourselves from new technology doubling down on some of the iniquities that we see around us and simply reflecting those in the new technologies. Or how do we ensure that we break down some of those iniquities using the new technology?
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful question. Hey. So if you think about how you perceive the world, we have a filter, right? We all have a different observer through which we see the world. We absorb information, then we make certain things, something happens in here, and then we perceive reality. Something similar happens with artificial intelligence. It's a similar logic, right? You feed the model, and then the model produces other things. So you can probably already see a potential problem there, right? Garbage in, garbage out. We're feeding these models with language that we have publicly available, so things that we have in social media, the news outlets. And just imagine what world can be created if you feed something into that. So I think we have an opportunity right now, just like happened in the third industrial revolution, to think ahead of what are these potential markers that need to be created to control for the collateral damage that technology can have. And I think this collateral damage is very risky because it deals with psychology, language, and our perception of reality. what can we do? Well, we have to make sure that the models are trained in a way that's more equitable. So yes, it's fun, it's exciting to create new technology, to go into the next algorithm. Let's go on into GPT-3 and start using it. But then also let's create markers for those who are creating that technology. Let's feed the model with voices that were probably obscured in the past. And I think the model, and to end with that, I think the model can actually help us if we're very smart about it. What if we feed models with what has happened historically? What if we let them know the inequalities, the atrocities that humankind has produced? And we make sure that they can, in a way, self-correct itself to the best of their ability, or at least we can create new models that can tell us when that's happening. So my work tries to illustrate that. It's like, look at this corpus, look at this semantic toxicity that's being created. What can we do about it?
So there's our first call to action, that with this new technology, we engage with the leaders of some of the businesses who are creating the technology to answer those questions. Do you feel here at the World Economic Forum you've been able to do that and actually speak to the people? I know Demis Hassabis, for example, was here, who, chief executive and founder of DeepMind.
Yeah, I think to some. I think you can tell when we have visionary leaders, they easily get the point of this type of work. So I think a few, yes, they understand, like, oh, of course, we're creating new technology. How do we create markers so that technology doesn't create more pain and more damage? So yes, I think with a few. I think I've also had the opportunity to work with civic society organizations, which sometimes it's collaborative. The private sector can only do so much, but then other organizations can do the rest. So I've also had the opportunity to talk to them and see how can we support more independent journalism so that new voices are heard. How can we create indexes so that if a media outlet is saying something that is probably creating a semantic atmosphere that's toxic, we can not censor it, but we can say, oh, look at what you're creating. Yeah. What do you think about this?
And we know how important it is, diversity, equity, true inclusion, particularly for that next demographic who want to see a different type of world. And I think it's fascinating that you're asking the businesses that I'm involved in, news media, for example, to really think about this. So thank you, Joseph. So that, Dominique, we were lucky enough to sit together at dinner at the beginning of the week with some tough questions, which seems like a couple of years ago now. But Dominique, tell the audience a little about yourself, your fascinating journey, climate activism in the main, but so many other areas, and also just what you've learned this week now looking back.
Well, first, bonjour. Hi, everybody. It's such a privilege to be here. So I was born and raised on the unceded territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe, what is currently known as Ottawa, Canada. But I live in London, and I'm here to represent London Hub, or one of the London hubs, because we've got lots of shapers in London. So yeah, my journey is, climate activism. I'm a big climate nerd, specifically at the intersection of sort of social innovation, policy, and finance. And a big part of the work that I do and the questions that I'm asking is really, how do we move money and bring people together so that we can center and fund climate justice work? My journey is, I wear a number of different hats, but I am the co-founder and former executive director of Youth Climate Lab. And Youth Climate Lab is a global climate organization that works to support young people in their climate work. I recently left that in March. Now younger, cooler people are running it, and it's very exciting for me. And now I work really around philanthropy and how do we shift philanthropy so that it actually funds climate justice. Just a quick note on that is, there's not enough money going to climate. The money that is going to climate is mainly going to white people and male-led organizations in the global north. And so there's a massive shift that needs to happen. And yeah, so that's some of the work that I'm here to do. Wow, what have I learned this week? I feel like I've just been running around, just not overwhelmed, positively just full of wonder of meeting amazing people. And I think that, things that I've at least maybe not learned, but is a helpful reminder. Actually, one thing that I've learned is just the amazing work that my fellow shapers are doing. Hearing Joseph speak what they're doing, mind blown. We work in such different spaces, and it's so exciting to learn what we're each doing. Something else that was a sort of helpful reminder is just how welcoming the WEF community has been to us shapers. We've heard a number of times that we're the coolest ones here. But we know that the WEF supports us as shapers, but it was really nice to see, we're in sessions, we're at dinners, and people are saying, oh, you're a global shaper, like amazing, welcome, come to the table. And so that's been really amazing. And I guess a third thing that I'm holding right now and have been thinking about this week is just sort of leadership and what is courageous leadership. And when I look at my fellow shapers, I just think that shapers and young people in general are just modeling this incredible model of courageous leadership where they are calling out inaction, they're bringing their communities together, they're bringing people together, and they're really centering justice. And I think of, and I look at my fellow shippers, I look at the other young people here, young changemakers here at Davos and beyond, and it's saying this is a model of leadership that the leaders who actually have power and resources should model. And so that's something that I'm thinking about.
Dominique, I think that's such an important point, this notion of being invited to the table.
Yeah.
We spoke about this at dinner. But it's not only being invited to the table needs to change, it needs to be a different table. Otherwise, we're just repeating possibly the mistakes of the past. I did this session last year, and Chairman Klaus Schwab made such an important and vital point there. He said that the average age of the world is 29, and the average age of decision makers is 55. Yeah. And it's that delta, that gap, that we need to really think about. And we were talking about how every session should be a youth session, like every session should be a climate session. Yeah. These things are not divisible into silos, they are the same thing. And I think that was one of the things that we were speaking about. Yeah. I'm going to take slightly the action point around this money flow, global north and global south. Yeah. That is there somewhere that we can define how we change that point you make, where male-led, white-led organizations in the climate space get most of the philanthropic funding. Did you feel you were able to land that point? And as I said to Joseph, you felt that people were listening intentionally and changing behaviors?
I think it's something that is more and more known, and there was a great initiative launched this week around philanthropy, recognizing the gaps and how much more money needs to go into climate. I think the point of needing to go to climate justice and just transition is one that not everybody gets. I think there are some really, really great people, funds, foundations, donors who are doing that work, and they really get it, where they provide flexible, nimble funding, where they really trust the organizations, the individuals, the activists, the movement leaders, and the movements to do their own thing. And there is also others who just, don't really get it. And so I think I've been in a number of rooms here where I think this is, these questions have been raised, and really good conversations. So I'm really excited to see, especially with the new initiatives launched this week around philanthropy, how do we sort of continue those conversations and make sure that we operationalize them so that, there's real results on this.
Great, Dominique, thank you. Pratik, let me come to you. Tell us a little bit about your background, your journey here as a global shaper, and again, just the 2 or 3 things you've learnt or you found exciting about your week here.
Sure, thank you, Kamal. So I represent the Global Shapers Kathmandu Hub. I also represent the Global Shapers Community Impact Council, through which we oversee and try to amplify the impact of the more than 10,000 amazing shapers in 500 hubs across the world. What I essentially do is try to empower citizens to hold their governments accountable back home in Nepal. And one of the main feelings that's been permeating me throughout this whole time at Davos is this sense of urgency that I think world leaders also share, is that there is this crisis of trust, that we are trusting our institutions far less, we are trusting our leaders far less, but perhaps most perniciously, we are trusting each other far less. And there are many reasons for this. Disinformation, easy access to technology, but without the prerequisite understanding of using technology and differentiating between good sources, bad sources of information, things like that. And I guess the main takeaway was just how much we are alike in our thinking about the urgency, but we are very different about thinking what problems there are and the solutions that we can offer. As Dominique mentioned, there is a disproportionate lack of resources, funding, and support for initiatives from the Global South. And rooms and spaces and voices are occupied mostly by the Global North. But I'm happy that the realization that there needs to be an equality to bridge this geographic, economic, political divide exists in Davos.
Pratik, what was the conversations that really you felt maybe landed that? I mean, Dominique, as you say, the World Economic Forum, the whole Global Shapers Network is helping those conversations happening. You said you're on the Impact Committee, or heading the Impact Committee. What are the impacts that you're maybe seeing in a positive sense from your time here? This is about that call to action. I've been coming to Davos for many, many years. As you say, the urgency every year feels more definite, which is good to see. But I am interested in the output and the progress. Are we seeing that?
Right. So at least for civic engagement, I think there has been over the past decade, we've seen the Great Reset. We've also seen the Great Resignation. And now we are seeing a great divide. And it's a divide that will ultimately showcase whether the 21st century that we will all share will be a far more equitable one than the one we had before. And this is the inequality of developing countries and the developed countries, the haves and the have-nots. At least for civic engagement, for governance and political participation, I see a great opportunity. And this great opportunity comes from three trends that have defined our time here as well. One is that technology has become cheaper to access for the poorest of the poor, enabling them access to far more opportunities than ever before. Second is, in general, there's been more civic engagement and political power for ordinary citizens, and they want their governments accountable, and they want their institutions to be transparent. The final is a double-edged sword. It's the demographic dividend. The majority of the world's people live in the Global South. Of them, the majority of them are youth. And if we do not train them to be capable of handling the demands and the challenges of the 21st century, this demographic dividend will be a demographic disaster. And this is the challenge that we are faced with. And I think this is also the reason why we have these conversations at Davos. Yeah. And I think we're headed in a very good direction in that regard.
It's about the social and economic capital of that next generation being properly distributed. I think is a really interesting question. Thank you so much, Pratik. Nourya, same type of question. Bit of your journey, I think, is lovely for the audience to hear, the work you do, and also your time here at Davos and what you've learned.
Amazing, thank you for the question. So I've been a global shaper since 2019. I'm currently the Vice-Curator of Abidjan Hub, and I'm basically representing the West African Francophone hubs. I'm a software engineer, I think problem solutions. And what I see that is happening in the Global South, and I feel like that Pratik mentioned it, there is an issue about access. When I come here and I hear people talking about energy, sustainable energy, renewable energy, I'm like, okay, but there are still some places where people don't even have energy at all, not even talking about renewable energy. So I feel like access is something that is very important, and that we need to discuss it. We need to come up with proper solutions, because there is already a huge gap. We already have that gap. Now, what do we do to bridge it? How is it going to be 10 years from now if we're not thinking solutions now? Like, for us, it is very important, and as at the Global Shapers Hub in Abidjan, we are trying to bridge that gap in terms of education and access to digital literacy. If you mean digital literacy, that means people have access to internet. The internet penetration rate in Africa is 61%. So, and that's majorly the capital cities. When you go into the country, well, no internet. So it's definitely something that we are trying to tackle. And one aspect of it is definitely inclusion, making sure that women are part of that, evolvement. I feel that is not an African problem or global South problem only, because women everywhere are sometimes marginalized. I remember during my master's classes, people would call us women in tech the boys with long hair. So that's to give you an idea of what kind of biases we are facing. So I feel like this is something very important. And one last aspect would be, it is important to have a bottom to the top approach. People from the local communities understand better the issues they're facing. They are the ones who have the solutions. So instead of leaders, global leaders, thinking about, okay, we have this issue, how do we fix it for them? No, go on the ground, ask the people, and they will tell you. They will tell you, they know the solutions. And if I may say about what I'm taking away from this is, first, not all world leaders are bad. We always have that idea that there are some evil people sitting there, And what I've appreciated is that I've met fellow people like me who are trying to make sustainable change happen, and I've felt hurt, heard at least. I feel that the shift is happening. I feel that people are understanding that we need more and more young people at the table making the decisions as well. Because if you have most of the world population that is 2019 or under, they better be there, making discussions about themselves. So I feel like this is something that is happening. And well, another thing would be, we are the experts in our own experience. No one can be the expert in your own experience. So for me, that's a critical takeaway. We have to remember that we always have something to bring to the table, and we have to be understanding of where everyone is coming from, because that's collaboration. That's me understanding that you're coming from a different background. You have had different challenges, different opportunities. You met different people. And when I understand that, we're able to collaborate and build something that makes sense for the future.
I remember, that's fantastic, Nourya. I remember a very powerful point made at the panel last year was that it wasn't about those people getting out of the way, it was about collaboration and partnership. The expertise and the experience of my generation joined and partnering with the expertise and experience of your generation. And that's the way you can fix problems. So, Nourya, thank you very much for that. Joseph, could I bring you back in? I thought Pratik's thing about trust, it's very evident in media space, and a couple of people have touched on misinformation, for example, that lack of trust means that conversations can disappear into dark places or uncontrolled spaces. Just wonder, Joseph, if you would think about any solutions to those types of problems in some of the work that you're doing.
Well, I think one of them that causes that lack of trust is the lack of authenticity in leadership. We have a big problem of authentic leadership. And that's not necessarily, it's not meant to create guilt or shame in those leaders. A lot of them have faced situations in which that wasn't safe. It wasn't safe for them to be authentic. A lot of them just choose to do so. But I think when we focus internally in corporations on middle managers and top leadership, making sure they have authentic practices, really get a coach, solve anything that you need to solve so you don't pass it on to the culture of your organization. And to me, that's the essence of trust. I will trust you if I believe you, right? And I believe you if you're authentic. And I think we sense that when we are especially young employees, or especially now that the language around mental health, the literature is a little bit more prominent than it used to be. So you can easily sense or pick up on if this leadership or this company has practices that are inauthentic. That has to do with alignment with whatever policies you have around inclusion or climate, but it all goes back to authenticity. So I think that will be my answer to your question. We
launched a big report here at Davos on Tuesday about the next generation of leaders and consumers and voters and citizens. And you've just touched there on the issues of mental welfare and support and a different type of leadership model, which I think starts with listening rather than ordering. And I think there's some very interesting points there. Dominique, on that question of trust, I wondered what thoughts you had around there can be a degree when you land data points like the amount of philanthropic money going into climate change that goes to a certain type of leadership in a certain geography, that breaks trust because people think, what is the point of me trying something new? Are there solutions that you've seen?
Does it break trust or does it invite creative solutions?
That's a better way to look at it.
I'm very optimistic always, so that's why I do a lot of positive reframing. Yeah, I think absolutely, definitely. I think there's a lot of, especially young people, us as under 30s, the Gen Z, Generation Alpha, all of the young people and future generations, I think are being, there's a huge disservice to youth. And we're essentially discounting the futures of young people and future generations. And so I think when we look at the sort of slow pace of progress, when we see governments or we see philanthropy say, oh yeah, we really care. Actually, a great example is a lot of foundations love to show photos of climate strikers and say, yes, we believe in climate and we fund climate, but only 0.76% of climate funding goes to young people, goes to movements. And so to this question of trust, when you're faced with these realities and that heaviness, but also of the solutions, and then you're faced with people who have power and resources and are not necessarily following through, I think that definitely does break down in trust. And that breakdown of trust is also present, when we look at the UN climate negotiations, of course within the negotiations between countries, but also the young people who frankly want more and need more from the process, but the process just is not necessarily delivering for. So I think that, there's definitely a lot of mistrust. We're at a point now where, we're happy with all the pledges. Well, not happy enough, but there are pledges, and the next step is really making sure that those are fulfilled and expanded on. And then we can talk about sort of how do we build on that trust. But I guess it's also an invitation for us to say, okay, well, how do we positively reframe and say, how do we create opportunities and work together on that?
I'm interested, and maybe I'll come back to you maybe after speaking to Pratik, but I'm just wondering, a concrete example which has actually moved the dial in the direction that is more positive. I just wondered if you had that from the work you do directly. I'm always interested in thinking about positive, concrete solutions that people can then maybe go to and look at and then learn from and think about, is that applicable in the world or the area I work? So I'm just interested in that. I'm not going to put you directly on the spot right now, but you can have a little think about that. I might come to all of you for that as well. Nourya, you touched on the issue of women. I did an event last night with the WHO Foundation, which was led by women speakers from the Horn of Africa. And it was about handing over the mic and letting young women own the conversation. And it was a very powerful session and discussion. Do you see that institutions are understanding that they need to change the way they operate to not, I think one of the big things I'm hearing in this conversation is that we could quite easily repeat the mistakes of the past by driving technology which looks through the rear view mirror rather than looks forward. So I just wondered if there are examples again that you have seen where women have been properly listened to, which has led to substantial change.
That's an interesting question, and when you think talking about an example, there's one that comes right to my mind, and her name is Sephora Kojo. She's a Mandela Washington Fellowship alumni, and when she was selected for the Mandela Washington Fellowship, she was 23 years old, and she has an organization called Solis that is basically bringing leadership to women, training women to be leaders. And I feel that this was received pretty well because now they're receiving funding from international organizations. And I feel like people are understanding now that in order for sustainable change to happen, we need everyone to be at that table. And especially women, half of the world's population. That's a very practical example. I can take my example, for example. I have an initiative called Hakili that I started in 2019, and the main goal of it is to train women with tech skills. The ultimate goal, obviously, is to create the future tech talents of Africa, but definitely a focus on women. Women need to have role models. They need to know that this is actually possible. I met here amazing women who are actually living the life that I want to live, being able to have impact, regardless of how you look, how you dress, where you come from, and people basically understanding you. And I feel like this is something that is happening now. Obviously not everywhere, but we are definitely making progress.
Gee, that's great to hear. So there's two fantastic examples, one of which is you, which is brilliant. Pratik, similar. Just one example, concrete example where there has been progress.
Sure. And I think I'll give a very brief, I guess, background to why this issue actually works, right? Now, 131 countries in the world have had no progress against corruption in the last 10 years, right? Political leaders are the only class of people who apparently require no training for the job they have. If you want to be a chef, it's hard, right? Apparently, you can just walk into any Oval Offices anywhere. But I will talk about the solution that I've created in Nepal. We created Nepal's first civic app, where citizens can take a picture of any public service issue or civic justice issue. For example, there's potholes on the road, there's trash on the road, and these are issues that are very common in the Global South. Now, those issues are geotagged and sent to the government department. And if they resolve it, well and good. If they don't, you rate it 1 star, just like an Uber. And come next election cycle, we know exactly who has done what. And that is a transparency mechanism that is replicable across the Global South.
That is brilliant. There is a ripple of applause for that. I think there are two very, very important jobs for which you get almost zero training. One is being a politician, and the other is being a parent. So just put that on the table. My daughter is 22 and my son is 18, and I'm sure they feel they have a very under-skilled father in their life. Dominique, that example.
Okay, I have a few examples, but I feel like in my intervention so far, I've kind of jumped from big level of philanthropy and climate negotiations, and then also youth action. So I want to give examples of work that is being done across, that are being led by shapers, actually, in a lot of ways. Also, I encourage everybody here to talk to us after and learn about our work, because every single shaper here, 25, so half of our delegation here are working on climate, and they're all doing just like mind-blowing stuff. Okay, examples. So philanthropy, big problem, right? There are some really exciting examples of youth-led philanthropy, where there's one that is Canada-based. It's called the Harbor, and it's hosted by Foundation for Environmental Stewardship. I'm on the board, so this is like a little plug. And basically, they facilitate access of young people to philanthropic funding. And so foundations fund the Harbor. Then the Harbor has a sort of youth-led process that decides where that funding goes, and then it's distributed, and it's flexible. It really is based on what youth needs. And there's a few other examples of these models. The Free to Fund does this, but at a larger scale. And so that is something that's really exciting, in that there are sort of emerging ones that are coming out this year that we should, frankly, all support. Let's think about the climate negotiations. Big beast, UNFCCC. Marie-Claire right here, who's a shaper from Zurich, runs a youth climate negotiator program. This year at COP27, and Marie-Claire, you might need to just make sure that I have the stats right, but supported
60 negotiators from 27 countries.
60 youth negotiators from 27 countries, primarily from the Global South. And if you look at the negotiations, and part of why there is such a stalemate and such issues, of course there's trust, but because, like you said, young people are not in decisions of power, and initiatives like Marie-Claire's are actually trying to shift that.
That's great.
And yeah, I have so many more.
That's great.
Okay,
Joseph, one from you. we'll get some questions as well, but Joseph, just got one, if there's one example that you would like people here and watching on the stream, live stream, could take away, and then we'll come to questions.
I think, as we try to balance it out in terms of knowledge, right now in the Chicago Hub, we're working with an oral history project to rescue the narratives from the south suburbs of Chicago that's been traditionally marginalized and neglected. So I think that's a very good example because our stories matter, and the knowledge that we have, especially produced from academia, sometimes can have only one perspective. And that doesn't mean that all academia is like that. A lot of academics are doing great work trying to include new voices and new knowledge. But we can do the same by capturing our stories and the ones from our community. I think it's very future-driven, but really, if you think about it, that will become what a scholar will use to create new knowledge in the future. So how are we feeding that? I think that project is one. And we're also creating one in Ecuador, the first LGBTQ archive to preserve LGBTQ memory. And what we want to do is to make this a thing of all the countries where LGBTQ issues have been decriminalized. So, and we want to preserve that knowledge, but also make it a center for digital scholarship so that the knowledge that's produced is based on that information.
Fantastic. Let's have some questions. There's a person at the back. If we could get a microphone.
Perfect. Thanks for all the input. Mirko from the Hamburg Hub, also Global Shaper. I agree with all you said that we are moving into the right direction, but not fast enough. I think you all agree to that as well. In parallel, we hear world leaders like Olaf Scholz was here and talking about how amazingly perfect everything is going in Germany and the transition is just there, and secret it's not. And how do you think can we keep away from them luring us into slowing down instead of accelerating?
So the leaders can maybe think they've done the job almost.
Yes, that's it. And communicate that way.
Yeah. Nourya, do you get that sense from political leaders that because we've got some pledges and we've had some meetings, kind of job done?
No, I don't think so. No, it doesn't work like that. If I get the question right, you're asking whether political leaders are actually understanding the change that we're trying to make happen. Did I get it right?
Yeah, although there's a bit of complacency, I got a sense from.
Yeah, I feel like as young people, we are responsible for bringing the word out, and we're responsible for basically making sure they are accountable for what they say they will do. Because as young people, we're not just going to be here saying, oh, we want climate reality, we want inclusion in ethics AI, we want civil engagement. We have to be there because I feel like we as young people sometimes, we're sitting from a point of view where we think they don't want to make change happen, but sometimes it's just that they don't understand it, you know? Mm-hmm. I feel like we need to be more understanding and just be there, you know? That's what I was saying. You can only be expert in your own experience, and they need our experience. They need our point of view for them to understand. 50 years from now, we will be in their seats, hopefully doing better, but yes.
Yeah. It's not always malicious, I think. I think that is so true. It's sometimes ignorance, yeah.
If I could add to the excellent observation Mirko made. So we all are familiar with the term greenwashing, and I don't know if it's been coined yet, but we have to face the threat of youth washing, where youth are just invited to spaces as tokens, I think I don't need to talk anymore about this.
We have discovered a new phrase, youth washing. That is it. This is what so Dominic, this is what we were saying about this notion of, oh, come and join our table, and we nod a lot and smile, and then we say thank you so much and go on with our old business.
Yeah.
Bad thing. Questions. Who else would like to raise something? Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jennifer from Geneva, and I'm here as a mother, a spouse, and an entrepreneur. I have a question actually for Dominique. I know many people in your generation are facing eco-anxiety, and they're very anxious about the climate, and they don't know what to do, and they're very hopeless, and they say there's nothing we can do, and it's going to happen anyway. And I would love to hear. I would love to hear your response on what we can do to get these people to become ecopreneurs, or at least get behind the movement and to get behind the actions and the global movement going.
I love this question. And I think about this all the time. And when I used to run Youth Climate Lab, and sometimes we would do workshops, we would do things like pop-up labs in middle schools, and I'd have 12-year-olds say, I don't have a future. Like, so, well, you know, will we still be around in 12 years because I saw this, you know? And it's saying, oh my goodness, and it's to recognize, I think what is important is to recognize the heaviness of this, and that it is very scary, and it is scarier the younger you are. And I think it's important to sort of hold those feelings and to recognize them, not to ignore them, because it is scary. And sometimes I have days where I'm like, oh my goodness. And I think the other piece of that is also like seeing the good and seeing the solutions, because there are incredible solutions and so many different pathways of change. And I think we need to do better jobs. And there's some great organizations, Youth Climate Lab does this, where it's really around, okay, well, introducing and supporting young people to say, okay, well, this is an issue that you care about. What do you want to do about it? What do you like to do? What brings you joy? What are questions that you have? And, you know, it kind of can translate in so many different pathways of action. And I think that eco-entrepreneurship in particular, in Youth Climate Lab, we used to run a number of sort of incubator programs and the sort of early stage to support, okay, well, look, this is a big issue. And again, what can you do about it? But what does that translate in terms of a project or a business or so on? And so I guess it's to say that there's a lot of those initiatives out there. They are critically underfunded. But the bottom line is to sort of acknowledge those feelings. It's to come together, is to also community and to find joy as much as you can. And then it's say, okay, well, find your people. Now what? Let's do it. Yep. Let's do something about it.
Watch our streams, because these are positive, you know, solutions that we're seeing. Can we get a question down here? It'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very interesting. We have been talking about access, youth washing, getting a seat at the table, but I think you mentioned it quickly, like how do we actually change the tables?
For sure.
That we are not mirroring the inequalities in the system. And I think this is what is happening very often. Then we have young people there, but we are not able to actually speak up, or even if we do, the other people don't understand what we mean, because we use different terms which are not part of their vocabulary, or we actually use the same terms, mean something different, and there is a complete misunderstanding. And I think it's important for us to reflect, how do we change the table? And I think it's a systemic work, and it's very, very hard. At least I find it very hard, and I would love to hear your perspectives on this.
Joseph, how do we make those really fundamental changes?
So I'm going to answer based on how I have navigated Davos this time. I know that I'll unlikely change anybody's mind just for one conversation. Maybe I have, and I don't know. But I think it's a process. I mean, like you said, sometimes I have found also leaders that out of ignorance, they want to help, but they don't know how. They want to change or push the agenda, but they don't know what exactly to do or the consequences. Especially when we're talking about LGBTQI issues, it can be sensitive in certain countries, so they want that information. I think they need a face. I believe in interpersonal relationships and networks as one of the most powerful forces that drive change. So what I've done is meet me, know why I care about these things, and let's talk again sometime so I can show you more of the work. And I think you can easily sense when a leader is bullshitting, or she is right, or they are right. So and then you pick your battles. I think as an activist, you know that it's such a heavy environment that you try to be protective of your mental health as well. So if you find a leader that you think there's some hope, then okay, let's work on that. If there isn't, I just don't want to talk to you. It will be pointless,
Yeah,
we just have to wait another generation, and then you'll be.
Kind of choose your tribe sometimes, and choose a tribe that backs you.
So to summarize, I think creating that personal connection, nurturing that relationship, and then using the power of influence. influence is behind all of that. And I think influence beyond the title, beyond the seat you occupy, can happen from this person-to-person interaction.
Fantastic. I'm just very aware of the time. I'd love to get a question just here, and this will be the final one, I'm afraid. They did give us a little bit extra because this is such a good chat, but please.
My name's Kenza. I'm a fellow global shaper as well from the Geneva Hub. I think it's very refreshing to be here in Davos, where not only do, as you mentioned, the youth feel heard, but we have a panel dedicated to youth. I think it's great. However, outside of this niche environment, how do you think the youth can be taken more seriously?
Yeah, are we seeing it elsewhere? I think you can sometimes get a slightly skewed notion of the conversation from the World Economic Forum. I mean, Pratik, are you getting it elsewhere, outside these types of environments?
Yes, so I think there never has been a time where the youth of the world have so much power, and the power to hold power to accountable power. And there are so many organizations that are committed towards empowering the youth, right? But I think one of the things that we also can learn from is the fact that we stand on the shoulder of giants, right? People like Bill Drayton, who's helped social entrepreneurship move forward, especially by investing in the youth, Hilde Schwab, of course, and realizing the experiences, the opportunities they had, the mistakes they made in setting up their own foundations and empowering others. And even in your own communities, looking at youth leaders, empowering them, and essentially not limiting yourself to either the local or the international, but seeing it as a continuum of opportunities and possibilities that we all must together realize.
Nourya, same question. Are these types of conversations only happening in places like the World Economic Forum, or do you feel positive about many other spaces where these conversations should be happening? Are they happening?
Well, I would say yes and no. From my point of view, it seems like the World Economic Forum is the main place where this kind of conversation is happening. I do feel that countries are trying to include the youth more and more, but there is still a lot of work to do on that side. There's still a lot of work. And sometimes what happens is that those initiative conversations happen, but then there's no follow-up. We took the pictures, it's fine, very cute, but then nothing happens, you know? And I feel like as young people, as I said before, we need to follow up. It's our life. And there is a saying, an African saying, I don't know if it's African, but we like to take it, you know, that we are not inheriting the word from our predecessors. We are basically borrowing it from our successors. So let's keep that in mind, you know. Let's try to do our part. And I was saying earlier, in a couple of years, we'll be the old ones. What will we have to give back? What will we have done to show that, oh, we actually made an impact, so that young people in 10 years, 15 years from now will feel heard? Maybe it is our job to create those spaces where that happens.
Let's make this next year a place where we can follow up and make sure we've had progress. What an amazing panel. Thank you so much for your thoughts. We want to leave today at Davos on a Friday with positive intention, positive action, and I think you've got a big sense of that from this amazing panel of young people. And if you are our future leaders, I can rest easy in my old age. Thank you so much to the panel.